We've made it to the end of part 1 of this course. You have now seen how to use text, layout, imagery, and color within your visual notes. Now that we've looked at each of those pieces individually, and you have some idea for how you'd like to combine them in your own visual note-taking process, let's take a second look at the topic of materials to see if we can map your materials, the materials that you plan on using, with your visual note-taking process to see how well they fit together. Let's check it out. Remember that in its simplest form, the only materials that you need in order to take visual notes is something to write with and something to write on. What we will do in this video is make direct connections between the materials that you use and your process for using text, layout, imagery, and color within your notes. I think the best way to show this idea is with an example. So let's do that mapping, first with the materials that you write with, and then with the materials that you write on. For this example, we'll use a few different writing utensils. The pen that I use most is the Pentel Energel, and I use that pen for my own core font, my secondary font, and also to draw images. Let's say that for my title font, I want something a bit bolder. So for that, I use an ultra-fine point Sharpie, which even though it's called ultra-fine point, it still has a bolder stroke to it than the Energel. To bring in some color, I can use a highlighter to pull out some actionable ideas after I've taken the notes. So here I've got 2 writing utensils that I use in the moment and one that I use after the fact. Next, let's look at what I'll be writing on. For this example, I will take a tall and narrow approach with a 9x6 sketchbook. I like those dimensions because they simplify my layout. I can take a top to bottom approach, knowing that I only want to include one idea or diagram or quote per row of those notes. And I can separate each row with a horizontal line. Now, as we step back and look at these materials alongside the process that I'll be using, it feels to me like it has the right balance of constraints and flexibility. It shows a plan for how I will use my materials, but there is enough flexibility within that plan to not feel stifled while using this approach to take some notes. So this particular example of mapping materials to process is still a bit abstract. We will fix that in part 2 of this course coming up next. In those modules, we'll create plans like this, but ones that are specifically tied to learning, problem solving, and idea sharing activities. But before we do that, before we move on to part 2, I want you to try mapping your materials to your current process. It's okay if your materials or your process change in the future. In fact, they probably will. For now, I just want you to get comfortable making that connection between the materials that you use and your process for using those materials. I have included some resources below this video to help you do that, so be sure to work through those before heading on to the next module. Good luck, and I will see you in part 2.